Welcome to Reform Thinking, a special segment where we delve into the truths of Christian faith and practice. Today, you're joining us for the deep dive, where we take your sources and distill them into clear, actionable insights. Hello, and thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Our focus today is on a concept central to Reform thought. How authentic Christian practice serves as the clearest indicator of true grace. We've collected a stack of sources that lay out the characteristics of living a truly Christian life, and they contrast it with simply showing, outward signs of piety.
That's right. Our aim is to help you understand not just what holy practice looks like, but why it is inherently connected to real spiritual life. This connection, it comes from a divine operation within the heart itself. We'll look at the comprehensive character of obedience, the call to sincerity, and the need for constancy and faith through all of life's challenges. This discussion is about providing you with a clear view of how real faith appears in daily life, hopefully allowing you to examine your own experience and discern what matters most.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our sources lay out three core characteristics of what they describe as Christian practice, the actual expression and, the beneficial results of genuine spiritual affections. These aren't just good suggestions, they are fundamental. They form the very framework of a life that truly demonstrates internal change.
The first characteristic is universal obedience. This means a person's behavior must be entirely consistent with Christian directives, not just sometimes or in some convenient areas, but across the board in every aspect of their existence. And it goes beyond simply avoiding actions that are wrong, which are often called sins of commission like theft or falsehood.
So it's not enough to say, I don't steal, I don't get drunk, I don't lie. That's sort of the baseline, maybe. Our sources clarify that a true Christian also needs to be universal in the positives of religion. This means actively showing virtues, not merely refraining from vices. It's a profound alteration of character, isn't it? Not just about avoiding the bad, but about actively manifesting the good.
Exactly. The sources describe these positive aspects as being serious, religious, devout, humble, meek, forgiving, peaceful, respectful. And here's an interesting one: condescending. Not in the modern negative sense, like being patronizing, but in the older, beautiful meaning of genuinely stooping down, meeting others where they are, and serving them humbly. It also includes being benevolent, merciful, charitable, and beneficent in all your walk and conversation. Neglecting these positive duties, what we might call sins of omission, is considered just as serious as committing a clear wrong. It's a failure to fulfill God's directives just as much as actively doing something forbidden. Christ's teachings frequently point to these positive actions as being of the greatest significance.
That idea of universal obedience is compelling, but it also brings up a particular challenge, doesn't it? What about those especially stubborn areas, those sins that are deeply ingrained? Our sources delve into the crucial need to part with one's dearest iniquities. Can you explain what they mean by that and why it's so critical?
Certainly. These dearest iniquities are identified as the sins that are like a right hand and right eye. Those that cling most tightly to us because of our natural tendencies, established habits, or particular life circumstances. They're the ones we have a deep fondness for, perhaps even deriving a sense of identity or comfort from them. The sources argue that this applies to even the most challenging duties, those to which we might feel a great reluctance. It's a call to a complete renunciation of all ungodliness, not just the easily discarded ones. The sources use the powerful illustration of Joseph. Remember how he didn't reveal himself to his brothers who had wronged him deeply? Not until Benjamin, the most cherished brother, the one Jacob found hardest to give up, was brought to Egypt. This symbolizes that Christ will not fully reveal his love, his presence, and his peace until we surrender our most beloved desires and undertake the most difficult obligations for his sake. It implies a total, unreserved giving of ourselves. It's a real testing point.
And our sources don't leave us without powerful examples of what happens when we refuse this radical surrender. Think about biblical figures like Saul. He failed by sparing Agag, the Amalekite king, despite conquering all his other enemies. His partial obedience, ultimately led to his downfall and ruin. Or Naaman, the Syrian general. Despite being miraculously healed of leprosy, he wanted an exception for bowing in a pagan temple. He saw it as just a minor concession. Or Herod, who did many things at John the Baptist's preaching, but stubbornly refused to part with Herodias. These examples reveal that partial obedience isn't sufficient. It points to a deeper issue, a failure to truly let go of one's own will for God's. It shows that if even one corrupt member, however dear, is not cut off, it can drag the entire life into spiritual ruin.
Precisely. The sources see this as the very essence of the straightness of the gate and the narrowness of the way that leads to life. It demands an utter denial and a final turning away from all ungodliness, a full yielding of oneself that many find too difficult to embrace. It's a willingness to cut off what feels like a part of oneself for the sake of Christ and his reign in the heart.
So if the first characteristic is about the breadth of obedience being comprehensive, the next is about its depth or intensity. It's one thing to say you're doing the right things, but what about the effort? Our sources speak of a true Christian who makes a business of such a holy practice above all things.
Hmm.
What does that kind of earnestness and diligence truly look like, and why is it so central?
It means giving whole hearts and the chief of their strength to God's service. The Christian experience is described using images of intense physical exertion, running a race, wrestling against spiritual forces, fighting a good fight. It is not a casual stroll nor a half-hearted attempt. It's a vigorous, all-encompassing engagement where the kingdom of heaven is not to be taken but by violence. Note, true Christians are called to labor in God's vineyard with purpose, not idleness. They are seen as diligent servants, good and faithful soldiers, fully engaged in the spiritual conflict. It's an active pursuit, a principal aim.
That image of running, wrestling, fighting truly underscores the intensity. It suggests this isn't just about showing up, but about a profound application of energy. And the sources are incredibly clear on the consequences if that earnestness is lacking, aren't they? They issue a stark warning. Slothfulness in God's service and his professed servants is as damning as open rebellion. The slothful servant is deemed wicked and destined for outer darkness. This isn't just about avoiding a particular action. It's about the very disposition of one's energy and zeal. Those who are slack and neglectful in their course are described as not so running as that they may obtain the prize. It implies a posture of continuous, fervent effort, not mere occasional engagement or half-hearted participation.
Indeed, this active engagement mirrors the urgency of the Israelites eating the Passover lamb. Remember, as those that were in haste with their loins girded, their shoes on their feet, and their staff in their hand, it conveys a posture of readiness and active participation in God's will, always pressing forward, aiming for the mark of the high calling. Without this sincerity, this vigorous pursuit, there is no successfully navigating the narrow way that leads to life. It's a continuous, focused drive that characterizes true faith.
And the third characteristic brings it all together. This comprehensive obedience and sincere pursuit must continue to the end of life, through all changes and under all trials. It's not a temporary season of faith, but the continuous business of one's entire life. This idea of constancy is vital, isn't it?
It truly is. This constancy is a critical indicator of true grace, especially when facing trials, those things that make faithfulness difficult. Trials can stir up sinful desires, present temptations to compromise, or cause suffering like pain, contempt, or loss. Our sources indicate that God often brings these trials specifically to reveal sincerity. They serve to provide conviction to consciences and to the world that an individual possesses an internal divine principle and a truly changed nature that enables them to maintain a holy life despite challenges. It's the refining fire that shows what's genuine.
So what does this all mean for someone who stumbles or falls into sin? Because that happens. Our sources say true saints may be guilty of some kinds and degrees of backsliding. It may be foiled by particular temptations and may fall into sin, even great sins. But there's a key distinction here that separates them from those without genuine grace, isn't there?
There is. They never can fall away so as to habitually dislike or neglect religion or cease their comprehensive obedience. They do not become habitually more occupied with other things than religion. While they may err, their fundamental disposition towards God and holiness remains. If their behavior ceases to show a remarkable difference from their previous life, or if they turn back to a life of sin, it suggests they were never truly risen with Christ. The sources reference the Jews in Matthew 12:43 to 45. Remember, after a superficial change, they became full of themselves and spiritually proud, showing their last state far worse than the first. This indicates a false transformation where the underlying corrupt nature was merely rechanneled into a new form of wickedness. Perhaps even a more subtle form of self-righteousness, rather than being truly put to death. They never lost their attachment to sin.
We've clearly defined what true Christian practice looks like based on these sources. But for many listeners, I think the deeper question might be why it manifests this way. Why is this holistic, sincere, and constant practice so inherently linked to what our sources call gracious affections? What's the fundamental connection there that makes this kind of practice the natural outflow?
Well, at its core, gracious affections refers to a divine, internal, and active principle of life implanted by God himself. It's not just a feeling or an emotion, it's something divine, a communication of God, a participation of the divine nature, Christ living in the heart, the Holy Spirit dwelling there. This isn't a passive presence, it's the very vital force of God operating within the soul, fundamentally altering its direction and desires.
That's right. The sources state, Christ is not in the heart as in a sepulchre, or as a dead Savior that does nothing, but as in his temple and as one that is alive from the dead. This divine presence is inherently active, powerful, and effectual, with a divine strength on its side. It brings about a full and steadfast determination of the will for God and holiness, effectively governing a person's life from its deepest springs. Think of a beautiful statue that looks alive but has no internal principle of life. False affections are like that. True affections, however, reach the very depths of the heart, taking hold of the inmost springs of life and activity, which is what the apostle refers to as the working of godliness. It's an internal transformation that radiates outward.
One fundamental reason for this practice is that these gracious affections are founded on the transcendently excellent and amiable nature of divine things, as they are in themselves. This means your regard for divine matters is for their inherent value, for their own excellent and lovely nature, not merely for how they might benefit self or self-interest. This is a critical distinction.
It truly is. This explains why there's a universal practice. If you love religion for its intrinsic worth, its beauty and truth in itself, you embrace the whole of religion, not just the parts that serve a turn or offer a personal advantage. And because the nature of religion, rooted in God's unchangeable character, is invariable, this love also leads to persevering practice through all circumstances. Selfish motives, by contrast, are unstable. They can quickly fade when circumstances change or personal benefits cease. When you pursue something only for what it can give you, well, that pursuit ends when the giving stops. But when you love the thing itself, you remain constant.
Moreover, the divine instruction of the Spirit grants a natural relish of the sweetness of that which is holy, and a disrelish and disgust of everything that is unholy. This spiritual understanding involves seeing the supreme and excellent nature of divine things, especially Christ, not just intellectually, but with a deep experiential appreciation. It leaves a lasting mark on the soul.
This spiritual perception of Christ's excellence makes him supremely worthy to be chosen and adhered to. It draws true Christians to forsake all for him and follow him whithersoever he goes, making them constant to him and unwilling to be drawn away by anything else. They become thoroughly disposed to be subject to him and eager to labor with sincerity in his service because they have seen his singular value.
And these gracious affections come with a thorough conviction of the judgment of the reality and certainty of divine things. Those who genuinely hold to the infinite significance of God's revealed truths are necessarily influenced by them above all else in their practice.
It's that conviction that drives the action, isn't it? If you're not fully convinced that spiritual matters are real, supremely significant, and eternally impactful, well, you won't undertake the labor and trouble of a sincere, comprehensive, and persevering practice, especially through difficulties. Our nature is such that we are guided by what we truly believe to be of infinite moment. If our actions don't align with our professed beliefs, it's a strong indication that our beliefs, at least in their active form, are not truly held.
A fundamental reason for this practice is the change of nature that comes with gracious affections. As the saying goes, until the tree be made good, the fruit will not be good. This means the old nature be indeed put to death, and a new and heavenly nature infused into the soul. It's a deep internal renewal.
Otherwise, any outward religious strictness is a force against nature, like a stone thrown upwards. It will eventually lose momentum and return to its natural downward course. A corrupt nature, if not truly altered by God's grace, will always prevail again. But if a new nature is given, then newness of life will continue to the end of their days as its natural expression. Without this radical change at the core, external reforms are temporary. They will eventually dissipate as the old inclinations reassert themselves.
Furthermore, a spirit of humility, which is essentially an obediential spirit, always accompanies holy affections. A proud spirit is rebellious and resists authority, but a humble spirit is yieldable, subject, obediential. This disposition naturally leads to submission to God's will and his directives.
And there's a lamb-like, dove-like spirit which fulfills the duties of the second table of the law. That is, our relationships with others, which is a significant part of Christian practice. This refers to the commandments that govern how we interact with our neighbors. Also, a tenderness of spirit produces a quick sense of distress from evil and a fear of its appearance, fostering strict, universal, and constant obedience. This sensitivity helps true Christians recoil from sin and pursue holiness with great care.
Our sources also stress making a full choice of God as our only Lord and portion, forsaking all for Him, and a full determination of the will for God and Christ through self-denial. This includes embracing religion with all its difficulties, even hating our dearest earthly enjoyments, and even our own lives for Christ's sake. Now, this isn't literal hatred, obviously, but a prioritization so absolute that everything else pales in comparison, and it's willingly given up if it conflicts with serving Christ.
This wholehearted giving of ourselves with all that we have, wholly and forever unto Christ, without keeping back anything or making any reserve. This naturally leads to actually forsaking all when self-interest clashes with Christ's will. This ensures constancy through trials because the self is no longer the ultimate ruler. It is a complete renunciation of one's own sovereignty and an acceptance of Christ's.
It seems all these reasons point to one clear conclusion. True grace is not inactive. It is life itself, and the most active kind of life, possessing an inherent tendency to fruit. It relates to practice as a fountain has to a stream. It's not a barren thing, but rather a spiritual and divine life that inherently expresses itself through action.
And here's a particularly insightful point from our sources. They clarify that holy practice is as much the end of all that God does about his saints, as fruit is the end of all the husbandman does about the growth of his field or vineyard. This means regeneration. Christ's redemption, and even God's choice of us, are all for the purpose of good works, so that we should be holy and without blame before him in love.
Oh.
Every grace given, every spiritual insight received, and every element of Christian experience ultimately leads to this practical fruit of holy living. It's the very objective of God's work in us.
So, with all these reasons in mind, it becomes clear why our sources assert that Christian practice or a holy life is a great and distinguishing sign of true and saving grace. In fact, they call it the chief of all the signs of grace, both for assessing ourselves and for discerning the sincerity of others. It's the most reliable evidence.
The connection between this internal grace and outward holy living is constant and indisputable, illustrated in various biblical symbols. Consider the golden candlestick in the temple, which is seen as a representation of the Church of Christ. It was made with knops and flowers, where the knop signifies fruit and the flower a beautiful confession. The design indicates that wherever there was a flower, there was also an apple or pomegranate with it. The flower held the principle of the fruit, and it was never a deceptive appearance. The show of fruit always had real fruit accompanying it or succeeding it. This symbolizes how a fair and good declaration of faith is always joined with actual fruit in holy practice.
Then there are the ornaments on Aaron's ephod, which was the high priest's ceremonial garment and also represents the saints. These were golden bells, representing a good declaration of faith, and pomegranates, representing the fruit they bear. Just as these were constantly connected in the design, so too their good declaration and their good fruit do constantly accompany one another. The pleasant sound of their faith is always echoed and validated by the fruit they bring forth in life, demonstrating consistency.
And Christ's description of his spouse in Canticles: "Thy belly is like a heap of wheat, set about with lilies." Again, beautiful flowers and good fruit accompanying one another. These images all convey an inseparable link between internal spiritual life and outward holy conduct. It is a constant and unbreakable connection between the inner principle of grace and its external manifestation in practice.
Our sources make a very strong declaration here. This comprehensively obedient, sincere, and constant life is found in them only. What does this mean for everyone else, for those who might appear religious but lack this kind of practice?
It means that all unsanctified men are workers of iniquity. Hypocrites will not go through with the business of religion when it truly costs them something, and will not endure the trials God is wont to bring on those who declare their faith. They may appear exceeding strict and mightily engaged for a season, perhaps when it's convenient or socially advantageous, but they're still servants to sin. The chains of their old taskmasters are not broken. Their desires have yet a reigning power in their hearts, and therefore to these masters they will bow down again. They will not be brought to finally renounce sin and truly part ways with it, because it is too dear to them.
This brings us to a compelling illustration from our sources that helps explain the downfall of hypocrisy. The story of Pharaoh.
Ah, yes, Pharaoh. Under the severe pressure of God's plagues, he would make temporary confessions and promises to let Israel go. But crucially, when the immediate threat lifted, he would break his promises, because his desires of pride and covetousness were never really put to death in him, but only violently restrained by external pressure. He sought to serve God while retaining his desires. He wanted to serve God and enjoy his sinful inclinations too.
And our sources draw a powerful parallel between Pharaoh and many who appear to reform their lives. They might part with some of their sins, but not all, or they might give up more obvious acts of sin, but not part with their desires and lesser indulgences of them. This is exactly like Pharaoh's various responses to Moses. Remember, at one point he said, "Go sacrifice in the land," implying limited freedom. Later, "Go, but not too far," attempting to control their return. Then, "Let the men go, but leave the women and children," holding back families as collateral. Finally, "Go, but leave your cattle behind," attempting to limit their resources. In each instance, he tried to retain something for himself, unwilling to let go completely.
But true deliverance, as Moses declared to Pharaoh, requires letting go of all that they had, not a hoof left behind. The failure to utterly deny and fully renounce all ungodliness, to give up every single part. That is what makes the straightness of the gate and the narrowness of the way that leads to life so difficult for unregenerate people. It means parting with all sins, great and small, and everything that belongs to them, without any reservation.
Pharaoh's repeated backsliding after seeming compliance led to his dreadful and remediless destruction, a chilling warning against superficial changes that do not spring from a truly altered nature. Like the dog to his vomit, they returned to their former ways. Their seeming compliance was merely a forced obedience, without the true cessation of the inward principle of sin, and thus it could not endure or reach its proper conclusion. The old nature reasserted itself, leading to a worse state.
This also applies to false disciples of Christ's time, who followed him for a while, but none of them followed him to the end. They turned back for various reasons when trials or cost became too great. Their apparent adherence was temporary and failed when truly tested, revealing a lack of genuine internal transformation.
So, what does this all mean for you, listening today? Our sources clearly lay out that Christian practice, characterized by comprehensive obedience, sincere diligence, and constancy, stands as the principal indicator of genuine grace. It's the practical, observable fruit of a divine operation within the heart that changes everything.
This deep dive into these sources presses us to consider, is our Christian life marked by a holistic alignment with divine directives, an intense devotion to God's will, and a steadfast continuation through all the challenges we meet? Or is there any area, maybe like Pharaoh, we are unwilling to surrender fully to Christ?
This understanding of Christian practice as the fruit of true grace offers a vital lens for self-assessment and discernment. It redirects our focus from fleeting feelings or outward shows to the active, lifelong process of becoming more like Christ in every facet of our being. It invites us to consider not just what we say we believe, but what our lives actually demonstrate.
What aspect of your Christian walk might this insight illuminate further for you, prompting you perhaps to seek a deeper congruence between your internal affections and your outward actions? Something to think about.